The rain fell like shattered glass. Lightning split the sky above the wreck, igniting the night in flashes of white and red. Twisted metal, smoke, and silence, except for one sound. Except for one sound. A baby's cry. Trembling, almost drowned beneath the storm. From the shadows crawled a German shepherd, bleeding and broken, his paw dragging through the mud. His name, Rex, barely echoed in his fading memory. He followed the cry, limping through the wreckage, pushing aside debris until he found it. A bundle of blanket, soaked and shaking. A tiny face streaked with rain and blood. The baby's eyes met his. Wide, terrified, searching for something, someone. Rex nudged closer, nose to skin, heart pounding. The moment their eyes locked, the world stilled. The chaos, the storm, the burning wreck behind them. It all faded into a single truth. They only had each other now. He curled around the child, shielding him from the rain, from the cold, from the world that had just taken everything. His breath trembled, but his resolve did not. Lightning struck again, and in its flash, the broken dog and the crying baby became one silhouette of survival. Show your love, hit like, share, and subscribe for more. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the earth still smelled of thunder. A faint fog hugged the edges of the abandoned railway tracks, weaving ghost-like ribbons through the early dawn. There, under the weak light of a cracked street lamp, a German shepherd lay curled protectively around a baby no older than a year. The child's small fingers clutched the dog's damp fur, his tiny chest rising and falling with soft, uneven breaths. The dog's name was Rex, a name once shouted with affection in a home that no longer existed. His body was bruised, his coat matted with mud and streaks of dried blood. Every few seconds, his ears twitched toward the sound of the wind whistling through the tracks. Each sound made him stiffen. He wasn't resting. He was guarding. The baby whimpered, a soft, helpless cry that broke the heavy silence. Rex lifted his head, nose brushing the baby's cheek. A reassuring lick, warm and slow, calmed the child almost instantly. The baby sighed, pressing his face against Rex's side, trusting the heartbeat that thumped steady beneath his small ear. Even now, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by danger, there was love. Pure, wordless, ancient. Rex had not left the baby's side since the accident. Hours earlier, the world had been noise. Metal screaming, glass shattering, the smell of fuel, then fire. A car crash. A family torn apart in seconds. Rex had crawled from the wreck, limping, ears ringing. He'd found the baby crying in the grass, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The others hadn't moved. Rex didn't look back. He only knew one thing. The baby was alive, and he would keep it that way. Now, the night was turning pale with dawn. The wind carried the faint hum of a train far in the distance. Rex's eyes narrowed. Danger was never gone for long. He nudged the baby closer, wrapping his body like a shield. The baby stirred, clutching the silver tag on Rex's collar, the only sound of comfort in the emptiness around them. Moments passed in fragile stillness. A crow landed nearby, its wings slicing through the fog. The crow scattered into the air, feathers vanishing into the mist. The baby blinked awake, startled by the growl but comforted by the warmth. He didn't cry. He only reached for Rex's face, pressing his palm against the cold, wet nose. That touch, soft, trusting, was all it took to keep Rex moving. He stood, wincing at the pain in his hind leg, and looked around. They needed shelter, food, warmth. The tracks stretched endlessly in both directions, disappearing into trees that whispered with wind. The baby was getting cold. Rex bent his head, gently biting the edge of the blanket, tangled around the baby's legs. He pulled, wrapped it tighter, and then nudged the child toward his chest. His instincts screamed, "Move." Now, step by step, Rex guided the baby away from the tracks, following the faint trail of smoke from the wreck that had once been home. Behind them, the fog grew thicker. Hours passed. They found shelter beneath the old station platform. A collapsed roof, half covered in ivy. The scent of rust and rainwater filled the air. Rex lowered the baby carefully onto a patch of dry ground and licked his small fingers again, ensuring he was warm enough. The baby cooed softly, eyes fluttering open. For a moment, Rex just watched him. His breathing slowed. His eyes softened. Something deep within him stirred. Not command, not obedience, but purpose. He didn't understand the world of humans, their fragile machines, their strange voices. But this tiny creature, this heartbeat, he understood perfectly. It was his to protect. It was his to protect. As the baby slept again, Rex limped to the edge of the platform and looked out. The world was quiet now. Smoke still rose faintly from the distance, a ghost of what had been. He didn't know what tomorrow meant, or if anyone would come. But he knew the baby needed milk, food, shelter, things he couldn't provide with Will alone. And yet, he stayed. Even as his own body begged for rest, even as pain throbbed through his bones, Rex refused to close his eyes for more than a second. Every sound, a snapping twig, a distant howl, the rustle of branches, sent his ears flicking. He watched the baby's chest rise and fall. That was all that mattered. When morning light finally broke through the mist, golden and trembling, Rex's fur glowed faintly. The baby stirred again, eyes blinking open to the world for the first time since the crash. Tiny hands reached upward. Rex lowered his head, allowing the baby's fingers to curl around his ear. The connection was silent but profound. Two lives tangled together by fate, one born to protect, the other born to trust. In that quiet station ruin, the story of the lifeline began, with a heartbeat, a bark that never came, and the fragile sound of a baby's sigh mingling with the morning wind. The day broke cold and gray. Mist clung to the trees like torn fabric, and the sky hung low, the color of ash. The world felt paused, silent, except for the soft, wet breathing of the baby and the distant moan of the wind through the rails. Rex stirred first. His leg throbbed with pain, but his instincts pushed him up. He sniffed the air. Something was different. The rain had washed away most scents, but underneath the damp earth and rust, there was something sharper. Movement. The baby still slept beneath the worn blanket. His lips parted slightly, cheeks flushed from the chill. Rex nosed the blanket closer to the tiny body, then turned toward the sound. From somewhere beyond the trees came the faint creak of metal, like a gate opening. He froze, listening. It wasn't the wind, it was deliberate. Human. Hope flickered for a second, maybe help. But Rex's ears pinned back. There was another scent now, oil, sweat, and something sour. Not the kind of humans he remembered from home. The ones who laughed, who gave treats and soft pats. These smells belonged to men who carried hunger and fear in their skin. Rex limped forward, body low, eyes sharp. Through the fog, he saw two figures by the wrecked car in the distance. They were picking through the debris, their movements quick and greedy. Scavengers. He growled under his breath, a low, trembling rumble that stayed in his chest. He turned back toward the baby, urgency gripping his heart. They couldn't stay here. Rex returned to the small bundle, gently nudging the baby awake. The child blinked, eyes wide and unfocused, then whimpered softly. Rex licked his cheek. Quiet, the gesture seemed to say. The baby's whimper softened to a... Then, with practiced care, Rex took the corner of the blanket in his mouth and tugged. Slowly, painfully, he began to move, urging the baby along the uneven ground. The baby slid a little, then stopped. Rex adjusted, biting the fabric higher, his breath harsh. Every movement sent a pulse of pain through his injured leg, but he didn't stop. The sound of footsteps grew louder. He could hear the men talking now. Muffled. The words were meaningless to Rex, but the tone was enough. Threat. He dragged the baby behind a cluster of thick bushes, every muscle shaking from strain. He pressed close, covering the baby with his body. His fur hid the child completely. The baby's breath was warm against his ribs, trembling but quiet. The footsteps came closer, crunching leaves, snapping twigs. One of the men kicked at the underbrush a few feet away, muttering something about dogs and vultures. Rex held his breath. His heart thudded so loudly he was sure they could hear it. The baby shifted, a tiny sound escaping his throat. Rex froze. His eyes darted to the men. One of them stopped, turning toward the sound. Did you hear that? Rex's entire body went rigid. Then instinct took over. He burst from the bushes with a ferocious snarl that cut through the fog like thunder. His bark echoed through the valley, raw, primal, protective. The men stumbled back in shock, shouting. A Jesus! A dog! Rex didn't give them time to think. He lunged forward, teeth bared, fur bristling. His limp was gone, forgotten in adrenaline. The men shouted, one grabbing a metal rod from the ground. He swung it wildly, missing by inches as Rex started back. Snarls tore through the mist like fire. The baby cried out then, a piercing, terrified wail that sliced through the chaos. Rex whipped his head toward the sound. The cry was short, but it was enough to remind him. Protect him, not fight them. And with one last growl, Rex turned and ran. Back to the baby. They grabbed the blanket again, tugging desperately. The men were shouting, chasing, their footsteps pounding behind him. The ground was slick with mud. Every step was agony. But Rex didn't stop. He couldn't. The baby's cries spurred him onward, a rhythm of fear and urgency. The trees thickened, swallowing them into shadow. Branches scraped his back. Mud splattered his fur, but they were hidden again, but safer. He could hear the men cursing behind him, their voices fading. Eventually, silence swallowed the woods once more. Rex stopped only when his body gave out. He collapsed onto the wet ground, chest heaving. The baby's cries softened to hiccup. Rex turned his head, nuzzling the little one until the sobs stopped. The baby's fingers found his fur again, gripping tight. Exhaustion hit like a wave. Rex closed his eyes just for a moment. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw flashes. A small house laughter. A woman's voice calling a Rex, bring him here. The same baby smiling, crawling toward him on soft carpet. The smell of home, warm bread, soap, sunlight. Then, fire. Screams. He jolted awake, ears twitching. The baby was asleep again, this time peacefully. His tiny hand still held Rex's collar. The fog around them had lifted slightly, revealing a faint trail leading downhill. Maybe toward a village. Smoke rose faintly in the distance, this time from chimneys, not wreckage. Rex stood, shaking. His body ached, his paw throbbed, but his eyes were steady. He had to keep going. He looked down at the baby, the fragile heart that had become his reason to live. For the first time since the crash, the world didn't feel like an end. It felt like the start of something else, fragile, uncertain, but alive. Rex lowered his head and barked once, soft and low, a promise. They would survive, together. As he took the first step toward the valley below, the morning sun broke through the clouds, touching their path in gold. The world was no longer gray. It was painted with a faint, trembling light, as if even the sky had decided to give them another chance. The morning mist had lifted, revealing a bruised sky. Pale blue, streaked with the faint gold of a reluctant sun. They clung to the tall grass, glittering like tears. The world felt cleaner after the storm. But Rex knew better. Nature's calm could be a lie. He stood still for a moment, listening. The forest ahead was silent, except for the faint coo of distant doves and the whisper of wind brushing through branches. Behind them, the tracks disappeared into fog, a reminder of everything they'd escaped. The baby stirred in the blanket tied around Rex's neck and chest. He had improvised it at dawn, tugging and biting at the fabric until it formed a makeshift pouch against his body. The baby now rested close to his heartbeat, tiny fist curled in the dog's fur. Each breath against his neck reminded Rex why he was still moving. The slope ahead descended into a valley dotted with the silhouettes of broken fences and what looked like the remains of a small farmhouse. Smoke rose faintly in the distance, maybe from a hearth, maybe from something else. But smoke meant people, and people meant risk. Rex hesitated. Rex hesitated. He had learned too much about humans in one night. The way their noise brought danger, the way their smell carried fire and metal. But the baby couldn't survive on instinct alone. He needed warmth, milk, shelter, things Rex could not give. He lowered his head and began to walk. Every step through the tall grass was a battle. His injured leg dragged slightly, leaving a faint trail of blood. Birds scattered from the branches as he passed, their cries echoing like alarms. The sun grew warmer overhead, and for the first time, Rex felt the baby's body relax against his. The child sighed, a soft, content sound that made Rex's ears flick backward. It was strange, that sound, fragile but full of life. It told him that for now, the baby still trusted him completely. That small breath became his compass. The valley was quieter than expected. Old, broken fences lay half buried in the grass, and the farmhouse in the distance sagged under its own weight. Roof half collapsed, windows shattered. But there was shelter there, at least for a while. Rex slowed as he approached, his nose twitching. No scent of fresh humans. Only dust, mildew, and the faint old smell of animals, long gone. Safe enough. Inside, the floor was covered in hay and shadows. Shafts of sunlight pierced through the holes in the roof, scattering golden dust across the room. Rex lowered himself carefully, setting the baby down in the softest corner he could find. The baby blinked awake, eyes wide, curious. For a few moments, everything was still. Rex sniffed around, checking corners, ensuring no danger lurked nearby. A rat scurried across the far beam, disappearing into the roof. The baby followed its movement with his eyes, then giggled softly, the sound startling in its purity. Rex turned at the sound, tilting his head. He hadn't heard laughter in days. It was light, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He patted back to the child, licking his cheek. The baby squealed in delight, tiny hands gripping Rex's muzzle. It was a small, impossible moment of peace, a heartbeat of warmth in a world of ruin. But peace never lasted long. From outside came a faint crunch of footsteps, deliberate, heavy. Rex stiffened instantly, body coiled, ears forward. The baby sensed the tension and fell silent, eyes darting toward the door. Through a crack in the wall, Rex saw them, two figures walking along the path near the field. Different men this time, wearing old coats, carrying something long over their shoulders. Hunters. Their voices were faint but clear. "The tracks lead down here," one said. It might have been a stray, or a wolf. Rex's pulse quickened. He stepped in front of the baby, tail low, muscles tense. The hunters drew closer, their boots crunching in the dry grass. "Let's check the barn," the second said. Rex growled low in his throat. A warning. He looked back at the baby, whose eyes were wide with confusion. The hunter's shadows stretched across the doorway, now dark and tall. Then, a sound broke the tension. A distant train horn echoing through the valley. It startled the men. One turned his head toward the tracks. "Come on, leave it. It's probably gone." Their voices faded as they turned back toward the path. Only when their footsteps were gone did Rex exhale, muscles slowly relaxing. He pressed his nose to the baby's head, breathing in the soft human scent. The baby giggled again, as if sensing the danger had passed. But Rex knew better. Safety was an illusion. They had been lucky. Next time, they might not be. He needed to move again, find somewhere deeper, quieter, beyond human reach. The forest stretched far and wide. Somewhere in its heart, there would be water, shelter, safety. He picked up the baby once more, wrapping him in the blanket. His leg ached, but his eyes were bright now, filled with determination. The morning light spilled through the doorway as he stepped out, golden and warm against his fur. They moved on. By afternoon, the world had changed again. The fields gave way to forest, thick, dark, and humming with life. Birds sang above, insects buzzed, and a small stream glittered nearby. Rex lowered the baby beside the water and drank deeply, cold and clean. Then, gently, he kept some water in his tongue and dripped it against the baby's lips. The child stirred, swallowed, and smiled. Rex froze, watching the tiny smile curve across the baby's face. It was small, but it was hope. He lay beside the baby, the two of them framed by sunlight filtering through leaves. For the first time since the crash, Rex's breathing slowed into calm rhythm. The wind moved softly through the forest, carrying the scent of pine and life. Somewhere far away, a bird called, and the world seemed, if only for a moment, kind again. Rex rested his head beside the baby, eyes half closed. The baby's hand drifted toward him, settling on his paw. A perfect silence enveloped them, not of fear, but of fragile belonging. They were still lost, still hunted, still alone, but they were together. And together, they were alive. The forest had begun to change. The trees grew older, thicker, their trunks twisted like the memories of storms. Sunlight fell in narrow beams, and the air smelled of pine sap and moss. For the first time in days, Rex felt a small measure of calm. The baby slept soundly against his chest, wrapped in the torn blanket. Each breath was steady, soft. It gave Rex strength. It gave Rex strength. He limped onward, ears flicking at every sound, a distant stream, a rustle of leaves, the soft patter of dew dripping from the canopy. Hours passed. Rex stopped only when his paw gave way beneath him. Pain exploded up his leg, forcing a low whimper from his throat. He sank to the ground near a fallen log, panting. His body trembled with exhaustion. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. But he couldn't close his eyes. The baby was awake now, eyes wide and glassy with hunger of his own. His small fists opened and closed in discomfort. His lips moved, searching for something Rex couldn't provide. He cried. Weakly at first, then louder, roar. The sound tore through Rex's heart like claws. He nuzzled the baby's cheek, desperate to calm him, but the cry grew louder. Panic rose in Rex's chest. Crying meant noise, and noise meant danger. He glanced around, ears twitching, scanning the shadows. And then a new sound answered. A woman's voice. "Is someone there?" Rex froze. The voice was soft, human. Cautious but not cruel. It came from beyond the trees, accompanied by the sound of careful footsteps crunching over twigs. The baby's cries continued, desperate now. The voice came closer. "Hello?" I hear you. Are you?" The woman stopped short when she saw them. Her eyes widened, one hand covering her mouth. She couldn't have been more than 30, her face worn but kind, a shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. Before her stood the sight she would never forget. A battered German shepherd, ribs showing, fur clumped with mud and blood, shielding a crying baby swaddled in a filthy blanket. Rex's first reaction was instinctive. He lunged to his feet, snarling, teeth bared. His body trembled, ready to attack or die trying. The woman raised both hands slowly, palms out. Her voice softened even more. "It's okay, easy boy." Rex growled again, low and deep, eyes locked on hers. The baby's cry pierced the tension, echoing in the stillness. The woman's eyes flicked to the baby. She gasped. "Oh my God!" A child. She stepped forward, but Rex's growl stopped her cold. His fur bristled, every muscle rigid. The woman swallowed hard, kneeling slowly, lowering herself to his eye level. "You're protecting him, aren't you?" she whispered. "It's okay. I won't take him away. I just want to help." Her words were meaningless to Rex, but her tone carried something familiar. Warmth. The same tone his owner once used when she said, "Good boy." Rex tilted his head, uncertain. His breathing was rough, shallow. The woman extended her hand slowly, letting him smell it. Her scent was clean, smoke, herbs, and faint milk. "No meddle. No fear." "I see," she murmured. "You've done well. You've done well. You've saved him." Rex's growl faded into a whine. He lowered his head slightly, torn between trust and instinct. The baby reached out a hand, as if answering for him, small fingers brushing the air toward the woman. That was all it took. The woman crawled closer, tears in her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, lifting the baby gently from the blanket. Rex tensed, but when the baby didn't cry when he smiled, Rex exhaled, stepping closer. His eyes stayed fixed on her every movement. The woman pressed the child against her chest, rocking softly. "You poor thing. You've been out here for days, haven't you?" Rex stood beside them silent. His sides heaved with exhaustion, and his head drooped. The woman noticed. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the story written across his body. "You stayed with him," she murmured. "You protected him." Her eyes filled with awe. She reached out, brushing her fingers gently over his fur. Rex flinched. Then, slowly, allowed it. It was the first human touch he'd felt since the crash, and it carried something he hadn't realized he needed. Relief. The woman smiled faintly. "Come on, Oe. Let's get you both warm." They reached her cabin by dusk. It was small, tucked between the trees, smoke curling from a stone chimney. The scent of warmth, food, and life spilled from its open door. Rex hesitated on the threshold, eyes darting between the forest and the light within. Then, the woman, Clara, as he would later learn, carried the baby inside, humming softly. She turned back, hand outstretched. "It's all right. You can come." Rex stepped inside. The cabin was modest. Wooden walls, a hearth, a table, and shelves lined with jars. But to Rex, it felt like another world. The floor was warm beneath his paws. The air smelled of bread and safety. Clara placed the baby in a basket near the fire, wrapping him in a clean blanket. The child's cries softened to quiet gurgles. She poured warm milk into a small bottle, feeding him carefully. Rex lay nearby, watching every move, muscles still coiled but eyes softening. When the baby finally slept, Clara turned to Rex. "You need food too," she said quietly. She set down a bowl of water and a piece of bread soaked in broth. Rex hesitated, glancing at the baby. Then back at her. When she didn't move closer, he stepped forward and ate, slow and cautious. The warmth of food and fire spread through his body. His eyes began to close. For the first time since the accident, he felt the weight of safety, not complete, but enough to breathe. Clara watched in silence, tears streaking her cheeks. She had heard stories of loyalty, of dogs who refused to abandon their humans. But this was something else. Two souls bound by survival, neither speaking, both understanding. As the fire cracked softly and night deepened, the cabin filled with the peace that neither of them had known in days. The baby slept soundly, one tiny hand resting near the basket's edge. Rex lay close, his nose against the wood, keeping silent watch. And Clara, alone in her cabin for so long, sat by the fire and whispered, "We're safe now. Both of you." The words drifted through the room like a promise. The forest outside Clara's cabin glowed with the soft gold of early spring. Morning light filtered through the trees and spilled across the floorboards, touching the sleeping forms near the hearth. A baby wrapped in a knitted blanket, and the German shepherd who never strayed more than a breath away. Rex stirred first. His ears twitched at the hum of bees outside, the gentle rhythm of life returning. For the first time in weeks, his sleep had been deep and dreamless. His body still ached. The leg wound throbbed faintly, scars puckering under his fur. but there was strength again in his chest. He lifted his head, eyes softening at the sight of the baby. The child was growing stronger. His cheeks had color again, his breathing even. Slept on his back now, arms sprawled freely instead of curled in fear. Every so often, he made tiny sounds. Murmurs, half giggles, the kind of noise that meant he felt safe. Clara had done that. Rex's gaze drifted toward the woman at the stove. She moved quietly, careful not to wake her small guests. Steam rose from the pot she stirred, filling the cabin with a scent of porridge and honey. Her hands were steady, but her eyes, when they flickered toward Rex, carried something tender. Reverence mixed with curiosity. He still didn't let her come too close. Trust was built slowly, like dawn breaking over frost. "Good morning," Clara said softly, voice like a breeze through curtains. "You're up early again." Rex tilted his head but made no sound. His eyes followed her as she poured water into a bowl and set it beside him, along with a few scraps of cooked meat. He waited until she stepped back before eating, tail giving one slow wag, a gesture of gratitude she had learned to recognize. "You're polite," she said with a smile. A polite and protective, a proper gentleman. Her words made the space feel lighter. Days turned into weeks. Rex began to heal. The limp faded until only a faint stiffness remained. His coat regained its sheen, and his ribs no longer showed through his fur. The baby, whom Clara now called Leo, grew faster still. His laugh filled the cabin like sunlight, his fingers eager to grab everything within reach. At first, Rex would freeze each time Leo reached for him. The memory of the crash still lived in his bones, the smell of blood, the cry of pain. But Leo's touch was gentle, curious. One morning, while Clara tended the garden, Leo crawled across the floor and reached for Rex's paw. The dog didn't move. He simply watched, heart pounding. Leo pressed his tiny palm against the coarse fur and giggled. Then he leaned forward and rested his head against Rex's leg. Something inside the dog loosened, a knot of fear, guilt, exhaustion. He lowered his head, licking the baby's hair once carefully. Leo squealed with joy. Clara, watching from the doorway, smiled through tears. "What did Jimbai say to each other?" she whispered. By the second month, the three of them had fallen into a rhythm. Mornings were filled with warmth and small noises. The crackle of fire, Leo's babbling, the steady sound of Rex's tail thumping against the floor. Clara often sang while she worked, an old lullaby that spoke of stars and home. Rex didn't understand the words, but he felt their calm seep into the air. Sometimes Clara would talk to him as if he could answer. "Leo's getting stronger," she'd say, rinsing dishes in the basin. "He'll start walking soon. You'll have to keep up with him, you know." Rex would blink, tail giving a slow wag. At night, when wind rattled the shutters, Rex stood guard. He positioned himself between the door and Leo's basket, head on his paws, eyes half closed, but always alert. The forest was full of sounds. Owls, foxes, distant thunder, but none of it frightened him now. The cabin was their den, their world. Yet, beneath the peace, shadows lingered. Sometimes Clara would stand by the window, long after sunset, watching the horizon. The horizon. Her hands would tighten around the frame. She had seen the reports, news of the car crash that had taken a family on the mountain road. The mother and father, gone. Only the baby unaccounted for. Leo. She never said it aloud, but she knew. And every time she looked at Rex, she saw it in his eyes too, the ghost of loss. It happened one afternoon in late summer. Leo had just learned to stand. His legs wobbled like a fawn's, hands gripping the edge of the table as he took a few brave steps. Rex lay nearby, eyes wide with fascination. Every time Leo stumbled, the dog would nudge him upright again with his nose, earning squeals of laughter. Clara laughed too. "You're his guardian angel," she told Rex. But the joy didn't last long. A sound broke the peace, the distant growl of an approaching engine. It rolled through the forest, faint but unmistakable. Rex's ears shot up. He rose immediately, body rigid. Clara turned toward the window, her smile fading. "A car." "Out here." Rex moved to the door, low growl vibrating in his chest. Clara joined him, peering through the small glass pane. Down the dirt path, dust rose behind a dark vehicle. It slowed as it neared the cabin. Her heart raced. Who could that be? "Stay back," she whispered to Rex, though he didn't need the warning. The car stopped. A man stepped out, uniformed, cautious, carrying a folder under one arm. A police officer. "Oh, Mrs. Hale," he called. "We've had reports about a missing infant, found evidence near the old railway." Clara's breath caught. She turned to Leo, who clutched Rex's fur for balance, eyes wide. The truth was finally reaching them. Rex didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone: tension, intrusion, danger. He stepped in front of Leo, growling low. The officer froze, lifting a hand. It's okay, Clara said quickly, kneeling beside Rex. It's all right, boy. He's not here to hurt us. Her hand trembled against his neck. The dog's body was trembling too, not from fear, but from the unbearable thought of losing what he had fought so hard to protect. The officer's eyes softened. He's protective, huh? Clara nodded. He saved that baby's life. The man crouched slowly, gaze gentle. A good boy, he murmured. You did good. The words, those exact words, struck something deep within Rex. They were the same ones his owner once said. Good boy. He let out a low whine and lowered his head, eyes shifting toward the baby. Leo crawled forward, small fingers reaching again, this time not for safety, but for trust. The officer smiled faintly. We've been looking for him. His grandparents, they've been searching for weeks. Clara looked at Leo, then at Rex. Her heart broke quietly. She knew this day would come. She picked Leo up, pressing her cheek to his soft hair. You're going home, she whispered. Tears slipped down her face. You'll be safe. But Leo turned toward Rex, arms reaching. The baby's cry, not of fear but of longing, filled the room. Rex whined, pressing his head against Clara's leg. His eyes held something raw, human almost. Don't take him. Clara knelt, placing Leo down gently. Aki, say goodbye, sweetheart. The baby crawled forward, arms open. Rex lowered himself to the floor, letting the small body fall against him. The two stayed like that, unmoving, for a long, silent moment. Fire? Yeah. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the world waited. When the officer finally carried Leo toward the car, Rex stood at the doorway, tail still. Clara's hand rested on his back. The engine started, rumbling into the distance. Silence fell again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full. Of love, loss, and the quiet promise that some bonds never break, no matter the miles between. Rex turned his head toward the woods, the path that had once led to ruin. The wind carried Leo, sent for one last moment. Then he lay down by the fire, head resting on the spot where the baby had slept, and closed his eyes. Healing had come, but it carried the ache of goodbye. The days after Leo's departure stretched long and hollow. The cabin that had once hummed with laughter now breathed only silence. The fire burned lower, meals went half-eaten, and outside, the wind carried the scent of rain, the same rain that had first bound their souls together. Rex lay by the hearth, head resting on the wooden floor where the baby's basket used to be. The faintest trace of milk and warmth lingered in the air. He could still hear the echo of Leo's giggle when he closed his eyes, the rhythm of small hands patting his fur. Every sound in the forest now stirred a memory. The creak of the porch became the baby's steps. The cry of an owl became Leo's soft call. Clara watched him quietly from the table. She had stopped talking to him much. Not because she didn't care, but because words no longer seemed to reach him. Rex wasn't the same dog she'd found in the storm. He didn't bark, didn't play, didn't eat, unless she coaxed him. He would wander to the window each morning and stare down the dirt road until dusk, as if waiting for a miracle that wouldn't come. Sometimes at night, he would wake suddenly, ears perked, heart pounding. The forest outside would be still, but his mind was not. He saw flashes, smoke, screaming metal, the sound of the baby's cry trapped in the chaos. He'd rise, pacing the cabin, growling low at invisible ghosts. Clara would sit up from her bed and whisper softly, "It's all right, boy. You're safe. He's safe. He's safe." But Rex didn't feel safe. He felt unfinished. It wasn't just the loneliness. It was something deeper, primal. The bond between them hadn't been broken. It had only been stretched by distance. Somewhere out there, his child, his human pup, was calling in ways no human ear could hear. On the third night, a storm rolled in again. The thunder crashed so loud it shook the shutters. Lightning painted the forest silver and rain hammered the roof in wild red. Rex lifted his head, eyes glowing in the dim firelight. Something in the storm's voice whispered his name, or what was left of it. He stood and padded to the door, claws tapping against the floorboards. Clara stirred awake, seeing him silhouetted against the window, the same stance he'd taken the night of the crash. "Rex?" she said softly. "Don't go out there. It's dangerous." But his ears twitched. The wind carried something faint. A sound, a whimper, a cry. He couldn't be sure, but his heart knew before his mind did. He turned his head once, eyes meeting Clara's, full of apology and resolve, then pressed his paw against the door. The storm roared and the door gave way. He disappeared into the rain. The rain swallowed him whole. Rex bounded through the forest, mud splashing beneath his paws. The night split by flashes of white lightning. The storm drenched his fur, but he didn't slow. Something deeper than instinct drove him. Something sacred. Unexplainable. Every gust of wind carried faint echoes of Leo's cry, or maybe the memory of it, pulling him forward like an invisible leash. Branches whipped at his face, thorns tore his flank, yet he pressed on. The forest that had once offered peace now felt endless and haunted. At the edge of the ravine, he stopped. Lightning revealed a blur of movement down below, a small figure stumbling through the dark. For a heartbeat, Rex froze, breath caught between hope and disbelief. Then came the sound, a child's wail, soft but real. Leo. Without hesitation, Rex plunged down the slope, sliding through the mud, claws digging for purchase. When he reached the bottom, he found a soaked blanket caught on a branch, the same knitted one from Clara's cabin. His chest tightened. Leo was here, lost, terrified. Leo was here, lost, terrified. The baby sat crying near a fallen tree, tiny hands clutching the wet earth. His cheeks glistened with rain and tears. When he saw Rex, his cries faltered, replaced by a hiccup of recognition. Abba, it was the only sound he could form, but Rex understood everything it meant. He moved closer slowly, whining softly. Leo reached out, trembling, then buried his face into Rex's soaked fur. The dog curled around him, body shielding the baby from the wind. His heartbeat steadied against the child's ear, a rhythm of safety. For a moment, it was as if the world held its breath. But danger hadn't passed. The storm had loosened the riverbank ahead. Water was rising fast. The sound of rushing current grew louder, threatening to swallow the ravine. Rex looked toward the slope, too steep for the baby to climb alone. He barked once, sharp and determined, then gripped Leo's blanket gently in his teeth. Step by step, he began to climb, muscles straining, every motion powered by raw will. Mud slid beneath him. Rocks gave way, but he never let go. At last, they reached the ridge. A ridge. Rex dragged himself up, collapsed beside the baby, chest heaving. Lightning flashed behind them, and for a fleeting second, both figures, the battered dog and the crying child, stood silhouetted against a storm, the very image of survival, reborn. Somewhere far behind, Clara's lantern flickered through the trees. Her voice carried faintly through the rain, calling both their names. Rex barked, loud, clear, victorious. The sound tore through the storm, a cry of reunion and defiance. For the first time since Leo's departure, fear broke, replaced by something larger, purer. Not even the storm could drown it. The storm had passed, but its voice lingered in the forest, dripping leaves, groaning branches, the hush that comes after nature's fury. The morning light crawled slowly across the soaked earth, revealing a world reborn and scarred at once. Clara's hands trembled as she carried Leo into the cabin, wrapping him in a dry blanket. The baby was cold, but alive, his small fingers clinging to her sleeve. Rex followed close behind, his body shaking from exhaustion, his paws bleeding from the climb. Clara sank to her knees beside the hearth. She whispered, pressing her forehead to Leo's hair. How did you even... Her voice broke. You saved him again, didn't you? Rex stood nearby, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the baby as though afraid he'd vanish again if he blinked. When Clara met his gaze, there was no longer any doubt between them. The bond between dog and child was something sacred, unbreakable. For the rest of that day, the world seemed to hold still. To Grace, Clara lit the fire, brewed tea, and watched over them both like a mother to two wounded souls. Rex refused to rest until Leo fell asleep beside him, tiny hand gripping the fur at his neck. Outside, though, the peace was fragile. The forest was never truly quiet after a storm. Somewhere beyond the tree line, movement stirred, faint, deliberate. Rex's ears flicked, head lifting. The scent was unfamiliar, sharp. Human. Later that evening, when the baby finally slept, Clara stepped onto the porch, a lantern in hand. The air was heavy, damp, alive with the hum of crickets. She looked down the dirt road, the same one the police car had taken days earlier. Muddy tire tracks still marked the ground, but now there were others, fresher, smaller. Someone had come back. Her stomach tightened. She turned to call Rex, but he was already beside her, hackles raised, eyes glowing faintly in the lantern's light. His growl rumbled low, deep, not the bark of fear, but of warning. Clara whispered, "It's okay, boy. Maybe it's just the officer checking in." From the darkness beyond the trees came a faint rustle, then another. The light caught something metallic, the brief glint of a boot buckle or a belt clasp. Clara's pulse quickened. She stepped backward toward the door, but the sound followed. Rex moved in front of her, muscles coiled. The night had eyes, and somewhere within it, a voice murmured. Low, muffled, impossible to trace. Then silence. The kind of silence that warns more than it comforts. The lantern's flame trembled. Clara's breath caught as another shape, moved between the trees. Slower this time. Deliberate. Whoever was out there wasn't lost. They were searching. Rex stepped off the porch, one paw at a time, silent despite the wet earth. Rain still dripped from the branches, masking his movement. His eyes narrowed, tracing the direction of the sound. The wind shifted, and with it came a scent that froze him where he stood. Fuel, sweat, iron. Men, Clara whispered, Rex, come back inside, but he didn't. He lowered himself into the grass, watching. A faint beam of light sliced through the trees, a flashlight sweeping the undergrowth. Voices followed, distant but clear enough to make out. "Aw, I told you the dog's around here somewhere. I'll forget the dog. They said there was a witness." A woman. Clara's blood ran cold. Witness. She hadn't told anyone about the crash other than the police. Whoever these men were, they weren't rescuers. The flashlight beam neared the edge of the clearing. Rex's ears flattened. Every instinct screamed to attack, but the baby's faint murmur from inside the cabin stopped him. Protect the pup first. Always the pup. He turned and darted back to the door, nudging it open with his snout. Clara crouched by the cradle, eyes wide. "What is it?" she whispered. He whined, urgent, tail stiff, gaze flicking between her and the forest. Then the voices came closer, too close. Clara grabbed Leo, clutching him to her chest. But there's a trapdoor under the floorboards, she said, half to herself, half to Rex. Her husband had built it years ago to store winter supplies. She threw back the rug, pulled the latch, and motioned for Rex. "A go," she whispered. "I'll guard him." Rex hesitated only a moment before descending the narrow steps. Clara followed, closing the trapdoor above them just as footsteps reached the porch. A heavy knock rattled the cabin. "Mom?" A voice called, oily with false calm. "We're with the investigation team. Need to ask a few questions." Silence. The door creaked open. Boots scraped across the wooden floor. Rex pressed against Clara's leg, body trembling with restrained rage. Leo whimpered softly, and she covered his mouth gently, tears forming in her eyes. Above them, drawers opened, furniture shifted. One of the men cursed. "What's her?" "She's gone. Search outside. If that dog's here, we'll find him." The footsteps receded. The door slammed. Then, silence again. For several long minutes, no one moved. The only sound was Leo's tiny heartbeat against Clara's chest and the distant rumble of thunder returning over the horizon. Finally, Clara exhaled. "We can't stay here anymore," she whispered. "They'll come back." Rex lifted his head, eyes burning in the dim light. He understood. Not the words, but the weight of them. He pressed his muzzle to Leo's blanket once more, inhaling the scent that had become his purpose, his reason to fight. Outside, danger waited, but the shadows had taught him something vital. Fear was only another test of love. And love, the fierce, wordless kind that bound a dog to a child, would not fail again. Dawn came gray and thin. Mist hung low between the trees, weaving the forest into a silent veil. The storm had moved east, but its memory still whispered through the dripping leaves. Inside the cabin, the air was heavy with the scent of smoke and damp wood. Clara hadn't slept. She sat near the hearth with Leo, cradled in her lap, watching the embers glow faintly in the dark. Her mind replayed the voices from the night before, every word, every footstep. Those men weren't lost hikers or kind officers. They had purpose. They were hunting something. Or someone. Rex lay near the window, head lifted, ears twitching at the slightest rustle. His body never fully relaxed now. Every sound outside, the call of a crow, the shift of wind through branches, made him tense, alert. But there was no panic in his eyes anymore, only focus. He was no longer reacting from fear. He was guarding from love. When the first pale light broke through the clouds, Clara stood, adjusting the blanket around Leo. The baby stirred but didn't cry. His small hand gripped the edge of her shirt, a tiny gesture of trust. She looked down at Rex. "We can't stay here," she whispered. "They'll find us again. They'll find us again." The dog rose instantly, tail stiff, gaze meeting hers. He didn't understand the words, but the tone told him everything. Movement, change, the unknown. By mid-morning, Clara had packed what little she could. A few jars of food, a blanket. She hesitated at the door, glancing once more around the cabin that had been her sanctuary. Then she turned to Rex. "Stay close, boy." He brushed against her leg as she stepped into the clearing, Leo secured in a sling against her chest. The forest stretched before them, vast, dripping, full of both threat and beauty. Every few steps, Rex would move ahead, pausing to sniff the path, then glance back to ensure she was following. His pace was steady, deliberate, scanning every sound and scent. He was no longer just a survivor, he was a sentinel. As the sun rose higher, the world brightened. Wildflowers bowed under dew, and birds sang tentative notes from the treetops. But beneath the beauty lay unease. Somewhere behind them, the forest carried echoes, broken twigs, distant voices, the faint growl of an approaching engine. Rex stopped suddenly, ears erect. Clara froze. The sound came again, faint, metallic, rhythmic. A vehicle on the road they had just left. Clara's heart pounded. "Oh, we have to move faster," she murmured. Rex looked at her once, then turned toward the denser part of the woods. Without hesitation, he led the way, through thorns, roots, and uneven ground, carving a path toward safety that only instinct could find. Branches clawed at Clara's sleeves as she pushed through the undergrowth, following Rex's lead. The forest grew denser, darker, a maze of moss and shadow. She stumbled once, catching herself before she could fall on Leo. The baby whimpered softly, and she hushed him, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. Rex knows the way." The dog moved with purpose, every muscle tuned to the rhythm of danger. He paused at clearings, sniffed the air, and changed direction, always steering them away from the faint engine hum that haunted the distance. Clara had stopped doubting him hours ago. He seemed to sense things long before they became visible, as if the forest itself spoke to him. By midday, the trees thinned, revealing a slope that dipped into a narrow valley. At its center stood the remains of an old hunting shack, weather-beaten, half-collapsed, but standing. Rex barked once, short and sharp, then looked back at Clara. She followed his gaze and saw what he saw. The path down was slippery, but Rex stayed beside her, nudging her leg when she faltered. When they finally reached the shack, Clara pushed open the crooked door and was met by a rush of musty air. Inside, it was dim, scattered with broken tools, but dry enough to serve as refuge. She laid Leo on her coat and crouched beside him. The baby's eyes fluttered open, tired but curious. "We'll rest here for a while," she whispered, brushing his cheek. Rex circled once before lying near the doorway, his body forming a living barrier. His ears flicked with every sound outside. The drip of rain, the sigh of wind, the creak of trees, a constant orchestra of vigilance. Yet within the shack's small walls, a strange calm began to settle. For the first time since the storm, Clara allowed herself to breathe. She looked at the dog, soaked, scarred, but unwavering. "You're not just protecting him anymore, are you?" She murmured. "You're protecting all of us." Rex lifted his head slightly, eyes catching the faint light that filtered through the cracks. It wasn't understanding in the human sense, but something deeper, shared recognition. They were bound by survival, yes, but also by choice. Hours passed. The light outside dimmed again, melting into dusk. Clara fed Leo from a small bottle, humming a lullaby so soft it barely reached her own ears. The melody calmed her as much as it did the child. Rex dozed lightly, tail twitching whenever the wind changed direction. Then, near twilight, he rose suddenly, ears rigid, nostrils flaring. Clara's song stopped mid-note. "What is it?" Rex's gaze locked on the trees beyond the doorway. A shadow shifted between the trunks, tall, deliberate. And then another. Clara's heartbeat quickened. "They found us," she whispered. Rex moved forward, silent as breath, every muscle drawn tight. The forest's last light gleamed off his wet fur, turning him into something almost spectral. Not just a dog anymore, but a guardian forged from loyalty and love. As the footsteps neared, he growled low, a promise that no shadow would touch his family again. The forest held its breath. Rex stood motionless by the doorway of the shack, his body silhouetted against the fading light. The sound of footsteps had faded into the wind, yet his instincts screamed. Danger was not gone, only waiting. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of rain and metal. Clara clutched Leo to her chest, her heart pounding so loudly she feared the intruders might hear it through the walls. The baby stirred, sensing her unease. She tried to calm her breath, to still her trembling hands, but the echo of those approaching shadows wouldn't leave her mind. Rex turned his head slightly, eyes flicking to her. A silent reassurance. He wasn't leaving his post, not until he was certain they were safe. Minutes stretched like hours. The forest outside had gone utterly still. Even the birds had stopped their calls. Then came the first drop of rain, soft, then harder, drumming against the roof in a rhythm that mimicked a racing pulse. The storm returned. Clara sank to her knees beside Leo, rocking him gently. "We'll be okay," she whispered, more to herself than to him. He won't let anything happen to us. But inside, her mind replayed the moments of the past days. The crash, the pursuit, the isolation. She hadn't realized until now how fragile her courage had become. She had been strong for Leo, for survival, but every sound, every shadow chipped away at that resolve. In Rex, poor Rex, he carried his own storm. The thunder rolled distant but menacing, and his body flinched with each low rumble. Once, storms had terrified him, loud, unpredictable, a reminder of pain. Now he fought the instinct to hide. His fear was still there, buried deep in his chest, but it had changed. Fear no longer controlled him, it fueled him. Lightning flashed, illuminating the shack's cracked walls. For a moment, Clara saw Rex's eyes gleam, fierce, unyielding. And in that reflection, she found her strength mirrored back at her. She whispered, "You're my courage, aren't you?" Rex's tail gave the faintest flick as if answering. Outside, the storm grew violent. Wind howled through the trees, snapping branches like bones. The shack shuddered, and a plank near the roof split open, letting rain leak through an icy rivulet. Clara scrambled to move Leo to a dry corner, wrapping him tighter in a blanket. Rex paced near the door, glancing out again and again. The rain masked scents and sounds, blinding his senses. He hated that. Protection meant awareness. And the storm was stealing it from him. A loud crack of thunder made the baby cry out. Clara hugged him, whispering lullabies between tears. Rex pressed close to her leg, nuzzling the baby's feet with his nose, as if to remind him he wasn't alone. Us together. They waited. Woman, child, and dog, surrounded by storm and darkness. And in that fragile, trembling moment, the world outside disappeared. There was only heartbeat and breath, shared between them, keeping them alive. The storm raged without mercy. Rain lashed against the broken windows. Lightning flashed like white fire across the walls, and thunder rolled so close it felt like the ground itself was roaring. Clara clutched Leo tighter, whispering prayers between every clap of thunder. The baby's cries grew softer, exhausted, but his small fingers clung to her hair as if anchoring himself to her heartbeat. Rex stood rigid by the door, eyes glowing faintly in each burst of light. Every instinct screamed for him to protect, to shield. But how do you fight a storm? His ears flattened against the thunder's roar, his body trembling not from fear but from helplessness. He had faced men, fire, hunger, but this chaos that came from the sky itself, it made him feel powerless. A sudden crash shook the cabin. The roof split in the corner, with splintering. Rain poured in through the new gap. Clara gasped, pulling Leo away as debris scattered across the floor. "Rex!" she cried, voice barely audible over the wind. The German shepherd lunged toward the collapsing side, barking fiercely as if his voice could hold the walls together. Lightning illuminated his figure. Drenched, defiant, a shadow of strength against nature's wrath. Then, through the thunder, another sound crept in. Faint but distinct. A voice, "Over here, the shack!" Clara froze. Her heart seized in her chest. That voice, deep, urgent, belonged to one of the men. The storm hadn't buried them. It had hidden them long enough to get close. She looked at Rex, panic rising in her throat. They found us. Rex's growl rumbled low, primal. He turned from the storm to the door, stance lowered, muscles coiled. Clara felt the shift in him. No hesitation now, no confusion. His fear was gone. There was only purpose. The door rattled under a heavy knock. "Open up!" Clara backed away, clutching Leo. Rain soaked her hair, her clothes, but she didn't care. "No, please," she whispered. Rex barked, sharp and thunderous, every sound of defiance echoing through the storm. The door creaked under pressure, wood splintering inch by inch. Rex lunged at it, teeth bared, claws scraping the floor. Outside, a voice shouted in anger, followed by a second, then silence. For a few long seconds, the only sound was the storm. Then, retreating footsteps, The men had backed off, deciding no frightened mother and child were worth facing a furious dog in the dark. Rex stood there, panting, chest heaving, watching until their voices vanished into the forest. What yeah? Only when he was certain they were gone did he turn back to Clara. She sank to the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks. Relief, exhaustion, love all tangled into one. You saved us again. Rex walked over and rested his head gently on her knee. His fur was soaked, but his eyes were soft, the storm still howling outside. Yet peace slowly finding its way back inside the cabin. Clara bent down and pressed her forehead against his. You're more than a dog, Rex, she whispered. You're a miracle. Thunder rolled one last time, distant now. The worst had passed. And as the night deepened, the three of them, woman, baby, and loyal guardian, huddled together beneath the leaking roof, wrapped not in comfort, but in the unbreakable bond that had kept them alive. The forest was silent after the storm, too silent. Mist clung to the trees like smoke from a dying fire. Every branch dripped with rain, every leaf gleamed silver in the weak morning light. It should have felt peaceful, but to Clara, peace was just another word for the moment before something breaks. She stirred from her uneasy sleep, Leo still nestled in her arms. The baby's breath came slow and steady, his tiny body warm against hers. She listened, one heartbeat, then another, until the rhythm calmed her trembling hands. Rex was already awake. He sat at the doorway, gaze fixed on the woods beyond the clearing. His fur was still damp from the night before, but his eyes burned bright, alive, alert, unyielding. Clara whispered, "Is it over?" Rex didn't move. His ears twitched toward the tree line. Then, with slow precision, he stood, tail low, head raised, a quiet warning rippling through his posture. Something was out there. Clara rose to her feet, wrapping Leo in the dry half of the blanket. She peeked through the crack in the wall. Between the dripping ferns, movement flickered. A shadow where no shadow should be. Her pulse spiked. They came back, she breathed. The realization hit like ice. The men hadn't given up. They'd just waited out the storm. Rex growled low, sound vibrating through the wet air. Clara turned toward him, panic surging. We can't stay here. Not again. Rex moved to her side immediately, muscles coiled, eyes darting to the tree line. His instincts screamed to protect, but even he knew the truth. If they stayed, they'd be trapped. Clara's gaze darted to the forest beyond the shack. The path that led north wound through dense brush and shallow streams. Rough terrain, but it might hide their tracks. South was faster, but open ground. She looked down at Rex. We go north. He gave a single, almost human blink. Agreement. She slung the small bag over her shoulder, secured Leo against her chest, and whispered, "Quiet, baby. Please, quiet." Then they moved. The forest swallowed them whole. Rex led the way, weaving through roots and low branches. Clara followed close behind, trying not to breathe too loudly. Every sound, every snapping twig or shifting leaf, felt like a scream in the stillness. Minutes stretched endlessly. The mist thickened, cloaking them in gray. Then, voices, faint but close. They couldn't have gone far. One man shouted. Another replied, "The dog's tracks are fresh. This way." Clara's heart stopped. She glanced down at Rex. His ears flicked back, then forward, assessing distance, direction, timing. He turned slightly, guiding her toward a narrow stream cutting through the forest floor. Without hesitation, Rex leaped in. The cold water splashed up his sides as he motioned with a soft bark, urging Clara to follow. She stepped in, gasping at the icy shock, but followed his lead. The current was shallow but swift, washing away their footprints. Behind them, footsteps drew closer. The hunters had entered the woods. Rex pressed forward, swimming deeper into the stream's curve. Clara followed, clutching Leo, the baby's soft breaths trembling against her chest. The sound of pursuit grew sharper, boots against wet earth, voices echoing through the mist. And then, suddenly, silence again. They had disappeared into the fog. The stream twisted sharply through the forest, its banks rising into jagged earth and slick moss. Clara's legs ached with every step, the cold biting through her soaked clothes, but she didn't stop. Behind her, Rex moved with fluid precision, silent, focused, the embodiment of instinct and purpose. The fog thickened around them, blurring the world into gray shadows. Every splash of water sounded too loud, every breath a betrayal. Clara forced herself to keep moving, clutching Leo tighter. "We're okay, baby," she whispered, though her voice cracked on the words. We're okay. Rex suddenly froze. Clara nearly stumbled into him. "What is it?" she whispered. He didn't move, just lowered his head, nose twitching. Then she heard it too. Faint, measured footsteps on the bank above them. The men were close, maybe 20 feet. Rex turned toward the slope ahead. The stream narrowed into a ledge, ending abruptly in a curtain of mist. Clara followed his gaze and felt dread bloom in her chest. A cliff. The water spilled over its edge, crashing into rocks far below. Her breath caught. No, we can't. Rex's ears flicked back, calculating every fiber of his being reading her panic. Behind them, voices echoed, closer now, shouting through the fog. There! In the water! Gunfire shattered the silence, sharp cracks that made Leo wail. Bullets struck the water behind them, sending up sprays of foam. Clara screamed, dropping low and clutching the baby to her chest. Rex barked once, a warning, and lunged ahead, blocking their view. His bark wasn't just noise. It was defiance, fury, and love all at once. Then he turned back to Clara. The message in his eyes was unmistakable. Jump. She stared at him, shaking her head. No, I can't. Will. He barked again, louder this time, stepping closer until his paws splashed against her knees. Behind them, another bullet whizzed past. One of the men shouted, Don't let them get away. Rex growled low. Then, without hesitation, he leaped over the edge. Clerics! Clara screamed. For one frozen heartbeat, there was only the sound of rushing water. Then came the splash below. Terror surged through her veins, but instinct overrode fear. She wrapped Leo tight against her chest, whispered a trembling prayer, and stepped forward. The world tilted, and then they fell. Cold. Wind. Weightlessness. The roar of water all around. They hit the pool below hard, the shock stealing her breath. She surfaced, gasping, clutching Leo above the waterline. Rex! She screamed through the spray. A moment later, a dark shape cut through the current. Strong shore. Rex swam toward them, teeth gripping a floating branch. He nudged it toward Clara, helping her cling to it as the current carried them downstream. The river swept them through narrow bends, away from the gunfire, away from the danger, until finally, exhausted, they drifted into calm water beneath an overhang of rock. Clara clung to Rex, crying from both fear and relief. You saved us again? Rex rested his head on the branch, panting heavily but alive. His eyes met hers, weary, fierce, and full of wordless devotion. The rain eased. The fog began to thin. To thin. And in that fragile silence, surrounded by the whisper of water and wind, they knew they'd made it. Barely. They had escaped, but at a cost. Rex's body trembled with exhaustion. His left leg dragged slightly as he tried to pull himself onto the rocks. Clara reached for him, her heart breaking at the sight. No, stay still, please, just rest. He obeyed, collapsing beside her, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Clara stroked his soaked fur. We're safe, Rex. You did it? For the first time since the night began, she smiled through her tears. And Rex, his eyes half closed, breathing steady, let the world go quiet around him. The world had gone quiet again. The river, once roaring and wild, now whispered as it moved through the stones. Morning light filtered through the mist like gold dust, soft and hesitant, touching everything that had survived the night. Clara sat on the riverbank, her clothes heavy with damp, her hair tangled and streaked with mud. She cradled Leo against her chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his tiny breaths. The baby slept. Finally, his fingers curled into her collar as if afraid to let go. For the first time in hours, Clara allowed herself to breathe deeply. They were alive. Somehow, impossibly, they had made it. Then her gaze shifted to Rex. He lay a few feet away, half in sunlight, half in shadow. His body was still, except for the faint movement of his chest. His fur was matted, his left hind leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Every few seconds, a soft, involuntary whine escaped his throat. Clara's throat tightened. Oh no. She crawled to his side, brushing wet fur from his face. His eyes fluttered open, dark, glassy, but aware. When he saw her, his tail gave the faintest flick. Even in pain, he tried to comfort her. Don't move, she whispered, her voice trembling. You're hurt, Rex. You saved us again, and now her words broke, tears spilling freely. Rex let out a low, quiet sound, not of fear, but reassurance. His gaze moved to Leo, then back to her, as if saying, he's safe. That's all that matters. Clara pressed her forehead against his. You're not leaving me. Not now. Not after everything. She scanned the riverbank for anything useful. Driftwood, vines, anything she could use to make a splint. Her hands shook, but she forced herself to move. She found a fallen branch and tore strips from her soaked blanket, working quickly, but gently. Every touch made Rex flinch, yet he didn't resist. He trusted her completely. As she wrapped the makeshift splint around his leg, she murmured softly, keeping her voice steady for him. And maybe for herself. You've been the strong one all this time. Now it's my turn, okay? When she finished, she sat beside him, exhausted but calm. The sunlight warmed their faces, the chill of the night slowly retreating. For a while, none of them moved. Birds began to return, their cautious songs echoing through the valley. Clara looked at the baby, then at the dog, and a fragile smile tugged at her lips. For the first time since the storm began, hope didn't feel impossible. She whispered, "We'll find help, Rex. I promise. We'll get you home." Rex's eyes softened, his breathing steadied, and as the wind brushed through the trees, it carried the faintest sound, not of fear or despair this time, but of quiet resilience, the kind that comes only after surviving the impossible. Hours passed before Clara could bring herself to move. The forest had shifted from gray to green again, washed clean by the rain. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, alive yet heavy with memory. She ran her fingers through Rex's fur, tracing the scars beneath. "You've been through worse," she whispered. "You always get up, so get up now, please." Rex stirred, lifting his head slightly. His leg was bound, stiff but supported. Pain flickered through his eyes, yet there was no surrender there. He tried to rise, managed halfway, then stumbled, collapsing with a sharp whimper. Clara caught him, tears brimming again. No, don't push yourself." She pressed a hand to his shoulder, feeling the tremor beneath his skin. "You've done enough for now." But Rex wasn't listening. He turned his head toward the forest ahead, the faint path that wound through the valley, and growled softly, not in warning but insistence. "We need to move." Clara understood. The men might still be searching. The river had carried them far, but not far enough. She tied the blanket around her shoulders, adjusted Leo in the sling against her chest, and looked back at Rex. "Okay," she murmured. "We go slow, together." Rex rose again, trembling but determined. Each step was agony. His paw dragged slightly, leaving uneven prints in the mud. Still, he moved, step by painful step, never more than a few feet ahead of her. The forest path wound upward. Sunlight filtered through dripping leaves, turning the mist into gold. Birds darted from branch to branch, their wings catching the light. It felt, for the first time in days, like the world was trying to heal. Halfway up the hill, Clara stopped to rest. She sat against a mossy rock, holding Leo close as he napped, his tiny hand clutching her finger. Across from her, Rex lay in the shade, chest rising in slow, rhythmic breaths. She studied him, the steady eyes, the torn fur, the quiet strength that seemed carved into his bones. "You should be resting by a fire," she said softly, "and not limping through the woods protecting us." Rex lifted his head, ears twitching, as if disagreeing. For him, protection wasn't a choice. It was who he was. A gentle breeze swept through, carrying the scent of something unfamiliar. Wood smoke. Clara froze, her heart leaping. "Rex, do you smell that?" He sniffed the air, then looked toward the ridge ahead, tail giving a faint wag. Civilization. Come on, boy," she said, her voice trembling between exhaustion and hope. Maybe we're not alone after all." They continued slowly, following the faint scent of smoke until the trees began to thin. Beyond them, the sun broke through fully, warm, golden, alive. For the first time since the nightmare began, Clara dared to believe that survival wasn't just a dream. And as Rex limped beside her, their shadows stretched long across the ground. One woman, one child, one wounded guardian, bound together not by fear anymore, but by the fragile, radiant thread of hope. By the time the sun began to set, the smoke scent had grown stronger. It drifted through the trees in soft spirals, blending with the smell of pine and damp soil. To Clara, it smelled like salvation. Warmth, people, maybe even safety. They climbed the final ridge, and for the first time in days, she saw signs of civilization. The faint outline of wooden fences, a narrow dirt road cutting through the valley below, and a small farmhouse nestled among fields of tall, swaying grass. Clara let out a shaky laugh, half a sob. "We did it, Rex. We really did it." Rex limped beside her, his gait uneven but steady. His ears flicked forward, eyes locked on the farmhouse. Yet something in his body stayed tense, the same instinct that had never failed him before. Hope was close, but so was risk. Clara adjusted Leo's sling, kissed the baby's forehead, and whispered, "Just a little longer, sweetheart. We're almost there." They began their slow descent down the hill. The path was slick from earlier rain, scattered with stones and roots. and roots. Clara took each step carefully, gripping a branch for balance. Rex stayed ahead, scanning the way, tail low but wagging faintly. Then, a sound. Distant at first like an echo. A truck engine. Clara froze, her breath catching. The noise grew louder, a rough, grinding rumble coming from the dirt road near the farmhouse. Rex turned, growling low. His ears flattened. It wasn't the sound of help. It was the same engine that had haunted them since the night in the cabin. Since the night in the cabin. The men had found the road, too. No, Clara whispered. Not now. Please. Rex's body stiffened. He looked from the farmhouse to Clara, then back again, calculating. The path downhill was too exposed. They couldn't reach the farmhouse unseen. If the men spotted them first, it would all be over. She knelt behind a fallen log, clutching Leo close. What do we do, Rex? The German shepherd took a few steps forward, peering through the grass. The truck appeared, dark, mud-splattered, headlights slicing through the dusk. Two men sat inside. One leaned out the window, scanning the tree line with binoculars. Clara's heart pounded. She ducked lower, whispering frantically, They can't see us. Please don't make a sound. Leo stirred, letting out a soft, sleepy cry. Clara covered his mouth gently, tears forming in her eyes. The men looked up sharply. Rex's growl deepened, quiet, guttural, like thunder before a storm. The truck slowed. The men climbed out, their boots crunching on gravel. Clara looked at Rex. I know. Don't, but he was already moved. Rex limped into the open field, tail raised, body tense. He barked once, loud and sharp, drawing every eye to him. The men shouted, startled. He barked again, then turned and ran toward the tree line opposite Clara's hiding place, drawing them away. Rex, no! Clara cried in a whisper, clutching Leo tight. Don't do this! But he didn't look back. He ran like a soldier who had already made peace with what must be done, limping, bleeding, yet unstoppable. And as the men shouted and gave chase, Clara could only watch her protector disappear into the tall grass. His silhouette swallowed by dusk. Rex's barks echoed across the valley like cracks of thunder, bouncing off the trees and scattering through the dusk. The men shouted after him, their voices harsh and frantic. Clara's pulse hammered in her ears as she crouched behind a log, clutching Leo to her chest. She could hear them running, boots crunching on the gravel road. One man yelling, "There, the dog!" followed by the metallic click of a rifle being readied. Tears blurred Clara's vision. No, please, not him, she whispered, voice trembling. Every instinct screamed for her to stay hidden, to protect the baby. But another voice inside her, quieter yet stronger, whispered something else. You can't leave him. He had led them through the river, faced down danger without hesitation, kept Leo alive when the world had turned cold and cruel. He was more than a dog now. He was their family. Clara pressed a kiss to Leo's forehead and whispered, Hold on, sweetheart. Mommy's coming right back. She tucked him behind the log, wrapped tightly in a blanket hidden by thick ferns. Then she ran. Branches whipped her face as she sprinted down the slope toward the sounds of shouting. Her legs burned, lungs searing, but she didn't stop. Rex, she called in a hoarse whisper. Rex, where are you? Where are you? Through the twilight, she caught glimpses, a flash of tan fur between trees, the dark silhouettes of men chasing, the glint of a rifle barrel raised. Rex started through the underbrush, using what little strength remained. He was clever, leading them in circles, drawing them away from the baby's hiding place. But his limp had grown worse. Every stride left a darker trail of blood. A shot cracked through the air. Clara screamed, freezing for a second, the echo slicing through the silence that followed. Then she heard it. A low, defiant growl. He was still alive. She pushed forward, stumbling over roots until she found him. Rex stood in a small clearing, body low, teeth bared, facing one of the men who now loomed only yards away. The man raised his rifle again. Clara didn't think. She threw herself forward, shouting, Stop! Her voice broke the stillness, startling him. His aim faltered. Rex lunged. With a final burst of strength, he leapt at the man, knocking him backward into the dirt. The rifle clattered away. The man cursed, struggling, but Rex held fast, teeth clenched on his jacket sleeve. The second man appeared behind them, gun in hand. Clara dove toward the fallen rifle, grabbing it by the barrel. She aimed without knowing how, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Get away! She cried. The man hesitated. Just long enough. Rex released his grip, turning to face the new threat, and barked, sharp and fierce. It was enough to make the man back off, retreating toward the road, dragging his injured companion with him. Moments later, the truck roared back to life and sped away, disappearing into the darkness. Clara dropped the rifle, her entire body shaking. She fell to her knees beside Rex. He lay on his side, panting, his fur matted with blood. But his tail thumped once, faintly against the dirt. "Oh, Rex," she whispered, cradling his head in her lap. "You saved us again." He looked up at her, eyes soft, full of pain yet peace. His breath came shallow, uneven. Clara pressed her forehead to his. "Stay with me, please? Please? We're so close now." The stars began to pierce the night sky above. Distant, cold, and countless. In that fragile silence, Rex blinked slowly, as if telling her he wasn't done yet. And though the night was heavy with exhaustion and loss, Clara felt it, the pulse of his heart still beating beneath her hands, still protecting, still loving. The edge of sacrifice had not broken him yet. The night was still, but the silence felt wrong. Too deep, too heavy, too heavy. Clara sat beside Rex beneath a tangle of cedar trees, cradling his head against her lap. His breathing was shallow but steady, every rise of his chest a fragile victory. The wound on his side had clotted, but the limp was worse. The moonlight shimmered through the branches, painting pale stripes across the forest floor. Clara glanced toward the ridge, where Leo lay sleeping, hidden in the thick grass. He hadn't stirred since she'd returned, too exhausted even to cry. She brushed dirt and leaves from Rex's fur, whispering softly, "You have to hold on a little longer. The farmhouse is just down there. We can make it by morning." Rex's eyes met hers, tired but still burning with that quiet, steady fire. He pushed his nose against her hand, urging her to move. He didn't need words. His gaze said everything. "Don't stop now." Clara helped him up, looping her arm beneath his body for support. They moved slowly, step by trembling step, down the slope toward the valley. The grass whispered around their legs. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The smell of smoke lingered, stronger now, but this time it wasn't from the men's truck. It was thicker, heavier, curling above the trees in dark plumes. Clara froze, her stomach twisted. Grist in it, twisted. No, that can't be. Through the gaps in the branches, she saw it, a glow on the horizon, faint but growing. The farmhouse. Flames licked the roof, devouring it in waves of orange and red. Fire. The same fire that had chased them from the cabin was now waiting at their only refuge. Clara's breath hitched. No, no, no. She turned in circles, searching for another way. But the valley was hemmed in by cliffs on one side and dense forest on the other. The fire was spreading fast, carried by wind and dry brush. Rex growled softly, sensing her fear. His ears tilted toward the crackling sound. Sharp, hungry, relentless, Clara swallowed back tears. "We can't go back. We can't stay here. We have to go through." She grabbed Leo's sling and strapped him against her chest again, feeling the baby's warmth and tiny heartbeat beneath her palm. Then she looked down at Rex. "Stay close to me, boy, no matter what happens." The heat began to press against them as they moved toward the valley floor. Sparks floated through the air like glowing insects. The ground was dry, brittle, each step crunched underfoot. Smoke rolled between the trees, thick and suffocating. Clara coughed, covering her mouth with her sleeve. Leo whimpered softly against her. The flames roared louder now, their light painting the world in violent gold. Rex barked once, sharp and commanding. A warning. Clara turned just in time to see a burning branch crash down only a few feet away, scattering embers across the ground. She shielded Leo instinctively, heart pounding. The path ahead was vanishing, swallowed by fire and smoke. And yet, there was no other way. Clara gripped Rex's fur tighter. "Through the fire," she whispered. We go through. The world had turned red. The fire's roar filled Clara's ears until it became the only sound. 1,000 crackling tongues consuming everything. The air burned her throat. Smoke stung her eyes. The earth itself seemed to tremble underfoot. She pulled her jacket over Leo's head, shielding him as best she could. His tiny fists clutched her shirt, his breath fast and scared. "It's okay, baby," she whispered through the coughs. "We'll be okay. Just hold on." Rex trotted ahead, weaving through the chaos. Ada and Argan through the chaos. His fur glowed orange in the reflected firelight, his silhouette cutting through the smoke like a shadow of courage. Every few steps, he turned back, making sure she followed. The farmhouse was gone, nothing but a skeleton of charred beams and falling embers. They had no direction now, only forward, through the storm of heat and light. Flames burst from the dry grass to their left, forcing them to veer right toward the stream bed. Clara stumbled down the embankment, half sliding, half falling, half falling. Mud and ash smeared her hands, but the shallow trickle of water below was enough, a line of safety. "Rex," she called. "The water! Get in the water!" He obeyed instantly, splashing into the stream and wading ahead. The cold water hissed where it met his scorched paws, but he didn't slow down. He moved like a shield, clearing the way, every motion driven by instincts stronger than pain. Clara followed, clutching Leo tight. The smoke thickened overhead, a suffocating blanket that turned day into night. Sparks drifted down like dying stars. Then, above the roaring fire, a sound cut through, a tree cracking, splintering. She looked up just as the flaming trunk broke and fell toward them. Rex saw it first. He barked, one sharp warning, then lunged, knocking Clara sideways into the shallows. The tree hit the bank with a deafening crash, sending a wave of sparks and debris across the stream. Rex, no," he whimpered softly, but his eyes met hers, steady, unflinching. Even trapped, his only concern was her. Clara tried to lift the branch, but it was too heavy. The flames were closing in, the heat unbearable. Tears streaked her soot-covered face. "Please don't do this. I can't lose you." Rex's paw pushed weakly at her arm, urging her away. "Go." She shook her head violently. "I'm not leaving you." "I'm not." But then Leo cried, small, helpless, choking on the smoke. And something inside Clara broke. She looked down at Rex, sobbing. "I'll come back. I swear it." She laid her hand against his muzzle one last time, pressing a trembling kiss between his eyes. "You saved us. Now I'll save you." Rex's tail thumped once against the mud. Faint, but certain. Then Clara turned and ran through the water, clutching Leo, following the narrow current that led toward the open fields. Behind her, the fire raged higher, swallowing the night. But somewhere within it, a single bark rang out, hoarse yet fierce, echoing through the flames, like a promise that he would not give up. Not until they were safe. The night sky burned behind her. Clara stumbled out of the forest, coughing violently, clutching Leo to her chest. Her lungs felt shredded by smoke, her legs heavy as stone. Yet she didn't stop running until the ground turned from ash to grass and the cool wind hit her face. They had made it past the fire line. But not all of them. She turned back toward the inferno, the forest now a wall of orange and black, devouring everything. The air shimmered with heat, and above the roar she swore she could still hear it. One bark, distant, fading. "A Rex," she whispered, voice cracking. Leo whimpered against her chest, and she held him tighter, trembling. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here. You're safe." But her heart was lying. She wasn't safe. Not while Rex was still in there. She sank to her knees, eyes fixed on the fire. The heat stung her face. Every instinct screamed to stay back, to protect her child, but another voice rose louder. "He saved you." Again and again. Her breath came in shaky burst. She looked at Leo, asleep now despite the chaos, his face calm, trusting. Then she looked at the burning forest, at the place where her protector still fought to breathe. "I can't leave him," she said aloud. "Well, I can't." She tore off her outer jacket, wrapping it around Leo to shield him from stray embers. She found a small hollow between two boulders, lined with wet moss. The safest spot she could find. She laid him there gently, kissing his forehead. "I'll come back for you," she whispered, tears streaking down her soot-stained cheeks. "I promise." Then she rose. The wind shifted, blowing smoke and sparks toward her, but Clara stepped forward anyway. Each stride back into the blaze felt like walking into a furnace. Her vision blurred, her lungs screamed, still she pressed on, calling through the storm a Rex. "Rex, I'm here." No answer. The world became a nightmare of light and sound, trees collapsing, flames snapping in every direction. She stumbled over roots, fell to her knees, and crawled through mud and ash. Her mind flickered with memories. Rex's first bark when Leo giggled, his warm weight beside her during sleepless nights, the unwavering gaze that had carried her through despair. Please," she gasped, choking. "But don't let me be too late." And then she saw it, a flash of movement through the haze. Rex. He lay near the stream, half covered in soot, his fur blackened, chest heaving weakly. His eyes found hers through the smoke. He tried to rise, failed, but his tail twitched once. Recognition. Recognition. Clara stumbled to him, falling to her knees. "I told you I'd come back," she cried, her hands trembling as she pulled at the burning branches around him. The wood was still hot, searing her palms, but she didn't care. "Stay with me, boy." "Please." Rex whimpered softly, not in pain, but relief. Through the smoke and fire, their eyes met. Two souls burned and battered, but still bound by the same promise. "We finished this together." The flames closed in, their roar deafening, their heat searing. Clara coughed violently, tears cutting paths through the soot on her face. Every breath burned, but she didn't stop. She clawed at the smoldering branches, trapping Rex, each movement tearing at her blistered hands. Come on, come on, come on, she muttered through clenched teeth. Don't give up on me now. The wood shifted slightly. She wedged a fallen limb beneath it and pushed with all her strength. For a moment, it didn't move. Then, with a crack, it rolled aside. Rex whimpered, struggling to rise. His fur was singed, his breathing ragged. Clara slid her arms beneath him, lifting him as best she could. He was heavy, limp, but she refused to let him fall. It's okay, she panted. I've got you. The fire howled around them like a living creature, each gust of wind throwing sparks across the stream. Clara could barely see the way out anymore, just shifting shadows and walls of flame. But she knew the direction by memory, by instinct, by love. She stumbled forward, half carrying, half dragging Rex through the water. Every step felt like walking through molten glass. Her legs trembled, her vision swam. Still, she whispered, almost there, boy, almost there. Rex tried to move with her, pressing weakly against her side. His body was failing, but his will wasn't. Even in agony, he stayed close, nudging her when she faltered, guiding her through the smoke. A burning branch fell nearby, splashing into the water and sending a spray of steam across them. Clara shielded Rex with her body, crying out as heat scorched her shoulder. The pain nearly buckled her, but she refused to stop. And then, ahead, a faint shimmer of silver, open air, the edge of the fire line. Clara gathered the last of her strength and stumbled forward. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her arms felt numb. Just a little more, she whispered, tears mixing with ash. Rex's paw slipped. He collapsed halfway out of the stream. Clara fell beside him, wrapping her arms around his chest. No, don't stop now, she begged, shaking him gently. Please, Rex. He looked up at her, eyes glazed but still aware, and let out a sound so soft, so human in its pain, it shattered her heart. Please, she sobbed, pressing her forehead against his. You can't leave me. You can't leave him. For a moment, everything went still. The fire's roar dulled. Time itself slowed, as if the world was holding its breath. Then, through the haze, a figure appeared. A man shouting, running toward them with a blanket. A firefighter. Others followed behind, their voices cutting through the chaos. Clara barely heard them. She clutched Rex tighter as strong arms lifted them both from the stream. The night exploded into motion, flashing lights, shouts, rushing water hoses. But all she could see was Rex's face against her shoulder, his eyes closing slowly, peacefully. You're safe, she whispered. We made it. He exhaled, a long, trembling breath, and went still. Clara's scream tore through the smoke, raw and broken. She pressed her face into his fur, refusing to let go as the rescuers carried them away from the blaze. And though the fire still burned behind them, in that moment the world went silent. The kind of silence that comes only when love has given everything it can. Dawn came softly, as if afraid to break the silence. The fire was gone. Only blackened fields and thin ribbons of smoke rose from the ashes, and then free. The air still smelled of burnt pine and rain-soaked earth. Somewhere in the distance, a single bird called, its song fragile but certain, echoing through what remained of the valley. Clara sat on the edge of a hospital cot inside an emergency shelter. Her clothes were clean now, though her hands were wrapped in white gauze. The skin beneath burned with every movement. Yet she didn't care. Her eyes were fixed on the small crib beside her. Leo slept there, safe, wrapped in a soft blue blanket. His breathing was steady, peaceful, the rhythm of life that had survived the fire. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, her gaze drifting toward the open tent flap. Beyond it, the world shimmered in pale light. Firefighters moved like ghosts among the ruins, their voices low, their faces drawn, and beside her cot, on a folded wool blanket, lay a collar. Worn leather, metal tag engraved with one word, Rex. Her throat tightened. She reached out, fingertips trembling as they brushed the tag. You were supposed to make it, she whispered. You promised. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they were quiet, not from shock, but from the slow ache of reality settling in. A nurse stepped in quietly, offering her a cup of water. You should rest, she said gently. You've been through hell, Clara nodded, though her eyes never left the collar. He saved us. Over and over. I don't even know how to thank him. The nurse smiled softly. Sometimes love doesn't need words, dear. Sometimes it just leaves a mark. One that never fades. When she left, Clara leaned back, holding Leo in her arms. She could still smell the faint trace of smoke in his hair. a reminder of everything they had escaped. Outside, the world was beginning to rebuild itself. The sun broke through the clouds, turning the wet fields to gold. Fire trucks rumbled away, and in that golden silence, Clara thought she heard something. A faint bark carried on the morning wind. She froze. Her heart skipped. It couldn't be. She rose slowly, stepping outside the tent, her bare feet sinking into the damp grass. The valley stretched before her, blackened, scarred, but alive. The sound came again, clearer this time. A bark, weak but real. Clara's breath caught in her chest. No, she whispered, then louder. Rex? The nurse and a few firefighters turned toward the tree line. From the distance, a shape emerged, limping, smoke-stained, tail dragging but wagging faintly. For a moment, Clara couldn't move. The world blurred. Then she ran. Rex! She cried, voice breaking. The shepherd stumbled toward her, his steps uneven, eyes bright with pain and recognition. And when she fell to her knees before him, his head pressed into her chest with a tired sigh. The sound of home found again. Clara sank to the ground, arms around Rex, tears falling freely into his soot-streaked fur. You came back? She whispered, voice trembling between disbelief and joy. You actually came back. Rex pressed closer, his weight heavy but alive, solid, breathing, real. His body trembled from exhaustion, and every breath rattled with effort. But his eyes still held that same unyielding fire, the same love that had carried them through every trial. Firefighters rushed over, astonished. One knelt beside them. He made it through that blaze? He murmured, shaking his head in wonder. Unbelievable! Clara looked up, smiling through tears. He's not just a dog. They lifted Rex carefully onto a stretcher. Clara never let go of his paw, walking beside him all the way back to the tent. When they placed him near Leo's crib, the baby stirred, a soft coo, eyes fluttering open. For the first time in days, Rex's tail wagged. Just once. Leo reached out from the blanket, his tiny fingers brushing the shepherd's nose. The dog closed his eyes and exhaled, a sound that seemed to carry peace itself. Days passed. The valley slowly healed. The forest, though scarred, began to show hints of green again, tiny sprouts pushing through the ash. The farmhouse ruins were silent now, but in the meadow beyond, new grass grew where the fire had burned hottest. Clara and Leo stayed in the nearby town while Rex recovered. His wounds healed slowly. The limp remained, a scar of loyalty carved into his very being. But his spirit, that indomitable spark, never faded. Every morning, Clara would wheel his cot outside into the sunlight. Leo, now sitting up in her lap, would laugh when Rex nudged his little hand, tail thumping against the grass. The sight of them together filled her chest with something beyond words. Not happiness exactly, but peace. One morning, months later, Clara took them back to the valley. The air was cool, sweet with the scent of regrown pines. She set Leo down among the wildflowers, and Rex sat beside him, ears perked, gaze soft and watchful. Clara knelt next to them, her hand resting on Rex's neck. You see this place? She said quietly to Leo. It took everything from us. But it gave us everything too, the baby giggled, tugging at Rex's ear. The shepherd leaned into the touch, patient, gentle, a guardian made of courage and tenderness. Clara smiled faintly. He'll never remember what happened, little one, but he will. The sun dipped lower, turning the sky gold. The three of them sat together in silence, mother, child, and dog, bound not by fear or tragedy anymore, but by something far stronger. When the breeze swept through the valley, it carried the faint whisper of the fire's memory, not as destruction, but as rebirth. Clara closed her eyes, listening to Leo's soft laughter and Rex's steady breathing beside her. After everything they had endured, the world felt whole again. And as the final light of evening settled over them, Clara whispered into the wind, We made it through, my brave boy. Rex lifted his head, eyes reflecting the fading sun, and for a moment it seemed he smiled. Not as a survivor, but as a guardian, finally at peace.